Hello everyone and welcome to my Mirage F1 module review for DCS World. And honestly, this one was a bit of a challenge to put together. The other reviews, I had pretty decent opinions going in. I knew what I felt about the module, what I liked and what I didn't like. This one I seem to be constantly changing my mind about. So now let's go through the review and see if by the end I can make up my mind about whether I like this module or not. So first off, it's worth noting that we do get 3 different planes in this module. We've got the Mirage F1 BE, this is the trainer version, so we've got the instructor seat and we've got the pilot trainee seat. Generally don't see this one around as much, it's got a little bit worse performance, what with having 2 cockpits, and it's mostly designed as a trainer rather than something with a Rio and a pilot. It can be situationally useful and certainly useful if you've got a buddy that you want to train up in the module the kind of old-fashioned way. We then have the first version released. This is the CE. This is your kind of general model, normally found in the kind of mid-Cold War plane sets on various servers. This is the one that I've had the most time in, but we will certainly have a quick look at the others as well. And then we have the EE. This is the updated version. It's got everything a little bit more high-tech. Very notably, it's got the refueling probe on there, so you can do air-to-air refueling with this one. It also has a very much updated cockpit with new systems to help you try and stay alive. Generally, this one is a little bit more restricted if you're looking at multiplayer servers, but is a little bit more capable. So, as we normally do, what I will be looking at now is how this looks as a digital museum piece. So the looks, the sounds, the various effects that we have here, how close this comes to represent a real aircraft. Then we'll have a look at the single player content, or in the Mirage's case, the lack thereof. And then we'll have a look at how this plays in multiplayer, how competitive it is, what you can do with it, and what you can't do with it. So first up, let's have a look around the graphics of this module. Here I am in the F1BE. The internal cockpit here is effectively identical to the one in the CE, except we've got the second cockpit in the back there. Here is the second cockpit in the back. Almost identical in every respect. The guy in the back can do pretty much the same thing as the guy in the front. Very notably here we have this little periscope, so although his view is really bad, you can still see forward from the instructor position. But yeah, you can do everything, controls are all doubled and symmetrical. And so yes, technically you could divide the duties between the two, but there isn't that much that you need to do in the Mirage, and so mostly this is just for training purposes. And just loading in here with CE, and we can see pretty much the identical cockpit. Now, in terms of how this cockpit looks, it's, I'd say, okay, but a little bit of a mixed bag in a kind of a weird way. You definitely have this worn effect. It's maybe a tad too worn in some areas for my liking, but you know, it's just about there in terms of how worn it is. Odd thing that I find with this though is there's a little bit of inconsistency with the texture resolution. Can see some areas, say here around the canopy, we've got kind of notably low resolution on some of the wear and tear features. Then on the other hand, we've got some really, really high resolution on the stitching and the various fabrics. And the odd thing for me is this kind of makes it a bit of the worst of both worlds. I like the heat blur, high fidelity, high resolution. That comes at cost of, you know, low performance. I also can absolutely make do with things like the Flaming Cliffs texture level, because then you get really good performance at least. Here it's kind of a mix of the both. You find things wherever you're looking that don't quite look perfect. They look a little bit off. And then this actually has a relatively long load time for me. The performance isn't ideal. It's definitely not bad looking, it's definitely not terrible performance, but it just strikes a little bit of an odd balance. The textures look a little bit off whenever you look too closely at them. The other thing I have to say from inside the cockpit in terms of this being a digital museum piece is the radar. We'll come on to the radar when we're talking about how this performs in multiplayer, but very importantly, this background scattering effect that we get here is completely faked. And honestly, this is the worst implementation of background scattering in DCS. It may look like it's trying to simulate background scattering, but it doesn't. This is just a repeating pattern that it shoves over, just essentially a random series of dots. Doesn't matter where you are, where you're looking at, what is there, whether you're looking at the ground, whether you're looking at the air, what altitude you're at, you see this same pattern repeated back and forth. And out of one of the more modern outings from DCS, that's a little bit disappointing. Externally, though, I have really no complaints at all. This is a really nice looking plane, looks very pretty. You have a huge amount of liveries available for this for various nations, and the detailing on the liveries looks really nice. 3D modelling looks really nice. We get some nice animations with things like the nozzle there. This thing has some lovely little air brakes. The animation there may be looking a wee bit choppy, but they certainly look nice. You can see on this particular livery we've got all sorts of wear and tear on it. That's livery specific, some look factory new, some don't. And we've got a nice afterburner effect there. You've got the little shock cones coming out, nicely represented. So yeah, externally, nice aircraft to look at. And just for completion here, jumping into the EE version, again we can see that a lot of the cockpit is very, very similar. Externally it looks pretty much identical, it's hard to tell the difference from the outside. But we do have some updated features. Big one is right here. We have a nice RWR display. The CE and the BE do have RWR in the form of an audio signal, but they don't have a display to show you where those tracks are coming from. Also got some more updated systems here, little bit more modernised. Unfortunately, still the same weird radar. So in terms of the sound then, let's just give a little bit of a listen to the various cockpit sounds. And yeah, all in all, I'd say the sounds are fine. They're nothing amazing, nothing that I've really noted, in kind of a good and a bad way. These aren't like some of the modules that we've been getting recently where the sound really impresses you, but it absolutely isn't bad enough to distract you. One thing I will point out there is you can hear a constant clicking. With this, that is the audible repeater of the fuel use. It just clicks as a certain amount of fuel is travelling through, so it clicks faster as you go to higher and higher fuel usage. You can disable that if it annoys you. I find it is actually really quite helpful at making sure that I don't sit at too low or too high RPM without realising. It can be particularly useful if you're, say, head is constantly out of the cockpit looking for targets, well, then you can hear very happily how much fuel you're using. You're not going to accidentally over speed in this thing. Otherwise, the sounds are all fine. It's relatively quiet cockpit, as you'd expect for this kind of era of aircraft, but you do have some nice sounds. I do particularly like the sound of the engine when you put it in idle in flight. That sounds pretty nice. Externally, I like the sounds a little bit better. With the one caveat being the afterburner seems to start and stop incredibly abruptly. That may be true for the real aircraft, I honestly don't know, but compared to almost every other DCS aircraft, the sound of the afterburner is very abrupt in both directions. The gun sounds, though, are really nice in third person, sound very, very chunky. So yeah, all in all, it sounds fine. It's not my favourite sounding aircraft. Mostly the sound just goes in the background, but that's kind of a good thing for sound. It's just ambient background. It's not bad, it doesn't distract you, but it also doesn't stand out like some other modules that we have with all sorts of effects, like hearing the airframe shake, hearing systems strain, and so on. So yeah, decent, nothing to really write home about, absolutely fine. So then we're on to one area where this module is really quite severely lacking, and that is the single player aspect. We do have training, but it's a very incomplete training list here. You can very much see that they have skipped entire portions here. Very notably, there's no air-to-air training at all. You've got your standard cold start, taxi, landing, parking. You've got instructions for how to use the navigator, which, yeah, that's quite useful. And then just a couple of ground attacks options, which are useful, but no air-to-air. You're going to have to either teach yourself that or look at Chuck's guide, goes through it really, really nicely. Air-to-air combat isn't too difficult in this, but definitely the thing this could use is using the radar. Should be a lot more important and upfront here, since it is the F1's big thing. Under instant actions, again, we have very, very little. On Caucus, we've got a few things, but if we look at these, for the most part, these are cold starts. We've got a few options here. We've got intercept, various options for dogfights. Dogfight practice is basically a cold start and a dogfight mixed into one. And then we've got non-combat operations with the Mirage EE, including aerial refueling. Nothing on Cold War Germany. As we go to the Marianas, we have the free map. Here, no combat. And the same thing repeats going down. We've got occasionally some navigation ones. For the most part, though, these are just varying forms of cold start with air-to-air refueling thrown in for the EE. Now, we do have some missions, but again, as you can see here, this is pretty much landing, start, takeoff, just in various different settings. We've got an intercept mission and a ground attack practice is about the most interesting that things get there. At time of recording, there is no free campaign. And unless I am mistaken, there are 0 paid campaigns for this whatsoever. The Mirage 2000 gets one, but our lovely little F1 is sadly missing there. Now, yes, as ever, you can make your own fun, you can make your own missions, you can go to the user files, but if you're looking for official stuff, the Mirage is very lacking if you want to be doing this single player. So then, on to multiplayer and how competitive this is. Now, as normal, this really depends on the server you're playing at. In modern servers, the F1 really does struggle. It has this really very powerful radar, which it certainly can use. The problem is there are just a lot of planes on more modern servers that have just outright better weapons. If you're flying on a Fox 3, people can hit you at ranges that you can't even lock them in some situations. I mean, it still can be used, but as ever, if you're taking a mid-Cold War plane out into a modern server, you're going to be at a major disadvantage. But what sets the F1 apart from a lot of other planes that I've reviewed is even just on Cold War servers, it really depends on what server you're on, and very importantly, what weapon set they have available. Mostly because if this thing does not have its 530 missiles, which go on the central or inner wing stations, then it's only got the outer missiles, which are either magics, normally magic 1s if it's on that level of restriction, which aren't great missiles, or you're using the Sidewinders, and then you've got this extra complication that there's no HUD symbology for where the Sidewinders are pointing. They point in a slightly different place depending on which seeker head you've got. Usable, but going down to just 2 not great missiles certainly makes this thing a lot more of a challenge to use. On the other hand, if your particular server with its particular weapon set does let you have the 530s, then all of a sudden that doubles the amount of missiles you have and gives you some really fancy missiles. In particular, the 530EM, the Fox 1 missile, can be incredibly useful, especially in conjunction with that radar. And yes, now I will finally talk about the radar. The radar is broken. Kinda similar to the MiG-21, it is just too good for what it is. It can see things too easily, especially against things like ground clutter and so on. But at least the MiG-21 has an effort to try and make it look like it's modelling ground clutter at low level. The F1 really doesn't. You essentially have a look-down, shoot-down radar. Yes, you've got these little dots appearing on the screen, but the actual return images you get from an aircraft are different from the dots. And so as soon as you can kind of mentally pass the dots against the actual returns, this thing is just immensely powerful, gives you amazing situational awareness, and if you can lock things that you probably shouldn't be able to, well then you can just fire a Fox 1 missile and win the fight. The 530s have been nerfed from their original implementation. They used to be kind of ludicrous when they came off the rail, kind of like AIM-9Xs. Now they're a little bit more sensible, but they can still do a hell of a lot. And this is especially notable if you compare it against things like the F4 with its really well modelled radar, and the F1 can just pick up things the F4 never could, which means if they're going head to head, it's a little bit of an odd fight. Now the radar does have one massive disadvantage that you really should be aware of that can kind of act as a big caveat there, and that is it has no IFF. The F1 does have IFF in a IFF responder, but it has no interrogator. There's no way of you telling whether the contact that you have off your nose is friendly or hostile. Now, things like EWR, particularly friendly picture, can help a lot. If you've got a GCI on who can tell you if there are friendlies off your nose, then the F1 can be absolutely amazing and deadly because it can just lock a target, head towards it, wipe it out. But if you don't, then you really have to kind of get close in order to make sure you're not about to shoot down a friendly. However, one thing that I find really useful with the radar is when you do lock a target, you do get a HUD symbology for where that target is, making it very easy to move and head towards that target. A lot of other Cold War aircraft don't have that kind of HUD symbology to put a pipper over the enemy, and so that is a major levelling. Even if you don't have any Fox 1 missiles, you can still lock an enemy, turn to see exactly where they are, and really just helping with kind of situational awareness there. But other than in those situations where you can get this head-on Fox 1 kill, the Mirage is difficult. Now, some people can absolutely dogfight in this. There are some people who pour in their concentration on this particular plane, some people fly this exclusively, and the skill ceiling there can be incredibly high. Really good players with the Mirage can absolutely dominate. I know a number of players that I come up against time and time again on servers that I know fly Mirages. That absolutely fills me with fear the moment I see them in the chat feed, because I know they are incredibly dangerous. But to get that good takes a lot of effort. The Mirage is not beginner friendly. Even systems like preparing the weapons is an awkward series of extra commands that you need to go ahead and learn what you're pressing. The plane is incredibly fast, ridiculously fast. It can go Mach 0.95 in mil with a loadout, and you can absolutely easily break Mach 1.3 by pushing afterburners again, even with a loadout. However, if you lose speed, this thing becomes an absolute sitting duck. Now, you do have all sorts of tools to help you if you lose speed. There's manual retraction of the leading edge flaps that can help you regain speed and get really, really fast. There's also combat flaps that you can manually deploy to help maneuvering at those speeds, but all of these are extra systems that you need to learn. What this means is a lot of new players trying out the F1 for the first time find it incredibly frustrating. You die and die and die and die, getting outmaneuvered by everything, outperformed by everything, and that puts a lot of people off. And certainly if you're looking for a easy to pick up module, this really isn't it. Now, so far I've just been talking about air-to-air combat, but really my favourite thing to do with the Mirage is air-to-ground combat. This is actually a brilliant strike aircraft. You can put on a frankly ridiculous amount of ordnance on this thing, and you have access to all sorts of special weapons. Things like Durandals for cratering runways are incredibly fun. You mix all that with this amazing speed, you can do deep strikes, get in and out, enemies can be chasing you and they just won't catch you, even when you have a load and they're almost clean. But this then comes again with the caveat that there's not a CCIP system, so you've got to know your bombing criteria, your correct reticle depression, or just get lots and lots of practice with it. So again, something can be amazingly effective, but is definitely not beginner friendly. There are plenty of times that you can take this thing out for the first time and just whiff your entire payload, whereas if you took something like an Su-25, you get that nice CCIP, you can put that target right exactly where you want it to. Then, trying to put my thoughts together and give a recommendation here, and I guess what I've been coming together with throughout this is that it's a interesting module. It's not for single-player focused people. Yes, you can get things on the user files, and I'm sure some of those are absolutely brilliant, but there's just not a lot of in-the-box support for single-player at all. For multiplayer, it depends on if you are willing to put in enough time to properly learn this. If you are happy to dedicate the time to really learn this module, then yeah, absolutely. I've seen some people who are amazing at this. I am definitely not amongst those group, but I know people can be brilliant in this thing. And if you do get really good in this, it can do pretty much anything. It can do ground strike, it can do cap, it can do a mix of both with the same loadout. But to get there, you're going to have to put in a huge amount of work. And honestly, to me, I compare it against the F4. The F4 is a similar kind of module, this really, really high skill ceiling that is very difficult to get into just because there are so many systems, everything is really complex, everything relies on the player learning the aircraft and how best to use it. Now, the F4 is a module that I still also am not good at, but I do find myself drawn to it a lot more in terms of modules that I'm happy to put in all of that extra time to learn. The F4 is definitely there. It's one of the modules I really want to get good at. I find it really fun. The reason you don't see me much in the F1 is it just doesn't excite me enough to want to put in that time. Now, if you're a big fan of the plane, then yeah, absolutely, this could be a module that you could sink hundreds of hours into and get huge amounts of joy out of it. And kind of to complicate everything, this module is relatively expensive. Even though it's been out for a few years now, we still never see it on sale. It's technically in its early access sale price, but it's other modules that have come out more recently than this have been on much more significant sales. So it's an expensive one to pick up even during those sale periods. So all in all, I guess what I'm saying is if you're excited about the plane and you're happy to put most of the time in multiplayer, then yes, by all means put this in, but expect a huge amount of work that you're going to have to put in to get actually good at flying this thing. If you're not fussed or you simply don't have the time, then yeah, there are other modules that are a lot more beginner friendly and still have similar kind of capabilities. So yeah, that's my review, and yep, by all means go down to the comment and roast me for skill issue for not being good enough to enjoy this, or let me know your own views. I'm especially interested in people who have put in the time to properly learn this, how it really feels to fly when you're really good at it. Also, let me know any other modules that you would like me to prioritise reviewing. I am going through my whole list of owned modules, but I'm prioritising ones that are suggested most either on Discord or on YouTube down below. And I do want to say a massive thank you to all of my Patreon backers and YouTube members. They should be coming up here. Thank you, you're all amazing people and you help this channel keep on going. If you're looking for something else to watch, then there should be a playlist of my recent reviews coming up on screen now. And otherwise, until next time, remember to be kind to yourselves and everyone else. Cheers.